The haunting did not begin with a scream. It began with a door no one admitted was closed. The Uncrossed. Case File TX-001. Subject, Son-gaksi. The bride who could not cross. The haunting did not begin with a scream. It began with a door no one admitted was closed. A bride died on the threshold of her wedding chamber. The family did not bury her grief. They buried her name. In September 2024, Seo Mun-ha entered an abandoned clan house in a southern mountain village. The house had been sealed since the late 1970s, when the last surviving descendant of the household had moved south to the coast and the property had been recorded in the local registry as unmaintained ancestral residence. Mun-ha had received the property's location 3 weeks earlier, on a folded slip of paper passed to her at the funeral of an elderly woman in a village 2 ridges away. The folded slip carried no name, no date, no signature. It carried 4 words written in pencil. Bridal chamber. Door closed. Mun-ha located the abandoned house on the 3rd afternoon of her search. She unlatched the front gate. She walked across the inner courtyard. She entered the main hall. She crossed the inner courtyard a second time, toward the western wing, where the bridal chamber of a clan house in this region would have been built in the early decades of the 20th century. She found the chamber on the 4th try. The door was closed. The threshold beam was intact. Beneath the threshold, wrapped in dust and old paper, were 3 things. A single coiled red thread. A broken hairpin. A folded strip of hanji pressed flat by the weight of the door for what Mun-ha would later determine had been 113 years. The Uncrossed. Case File TX-001. Subject, Son-gaksi. Korean folkloric register, the spirit of an unmarried bride who died before completing her rite of passage. Field investigator, Seo Mun-ha. Field investigator of unfinished crossings. Origin and training undisclosed in this case file. Date of recovery, September 2024. Date of original event, as Mun-ha would establish through the recovered hanji and the household's surviving private records, a night in the early spring of 1911. The door was closed. Mun-ha noted in her field record, not from inside the chamber. From the side of the living. The bride arrived at the clan house on the 3rd week of the lunar 2nd month, in the early spring of 1911. She was 16 years old. She had traveled with 2 of her father's senior cousins from a village 4 mountain ridges to the west, the 2 cousins riding ahead and the bride following on a small horse hired for the journey, her face covered with a dark veil according to the practice of the region. She arrived in the late afternoon. The clan house had prepared the western wing for her stay. The bridal chamber had been swept and a new layer of hanji paper had been pasted over the door panels. The wedding rite was to begin 3 days later, after the household had completed the pre-rite ancestral offering and the bride's family representatives had completed the formal exchange of the marriage gifts. She was given the name of the household she was entering, in the Korean practice of the era. Her own name from her father's house was, by the customs of the region in this period, withdrawn from public use during the 3 days before the rite. During those 3 days she was not addressed by any name. She was the bride. She was the new daughter. She was the one in the western wing. Her own name was held in reserve, to be returned to her on the morning of the wedding day in a small private ceremony that would integrate her into the household's ancestral record under her new married name. This is the practice of the region. It is documented in early 20th century Korean ethnographic records. There is nothing irregular in it. The bride was not silenced. She was carried across a threshold of names. Her own name from her father's house was, by the customs of the region, suspended for 3 days. On the 3rd night, the night before her wedding rite was to be completed, she did not finish crossing. On the third night, the night before the wedding rite was to be completed, the bride did not cross the threshold of the bridal chamber. The household discovered her in the early hours before dawn. She was not inside the chamber. She was not outside it. Her body had stopped across the threshold beam, her right shoulder against the wooden frame on the chamber side, her left foot still on the courtyard side. The household physician, summoned from the next village over the mountain, arrived at noon. He examined her. He found no marks of violence. He found no signs of poisoning. He found her hands cold and her pulse absent and her body bent at the threshold in a posture he could not explain by any medical category he had been trained to enter in his ledger. He did not write the entry that afternoon. He did not write any entry at all. The household had not requested a medical certificate. The household had requested only that he confirm she was no longer alive. He confirmed it. He left. The household did not call the village authorities. The household did not call the bride's family. The household assembled the senior cousins and the eldest grandmother of the clan and decided what would be done. She was not buried in the household's family burial ground on the western slope. She was not returned to her father's village 4 ridges away. She was buried, that same night, beneath the pine trees of the unmarked clearing at the edge of the mountain path. Her grave was not given a marker. Her grave was not given a name. She had stopped at the threshold. The household, by its decision that night, stopped her there permanently. In the week following the bride's death, the household completed the operations that would remove her from the record. The marriage ledger pages prepared for the rite were taken from the household record cabinet by the eldest grandmother of the clan and burned in the kitchen hearth before the morning meal of the 4th day. The pages had not yet been formally entered. The marriage rite had not completed. The pages, the eldest grandmother decided, did not therefore need to be retained. The bride's father's village representatives, when they arrived on the 5th day expecting to attend the post-rite reception, were told that the bride had taken ill and had returned to her father's village in the early hours of the 3rd night. They were not told she had died. They were not told she had been buried under the pines. They were given a small token of apology and they returned home. The bride's father's family, when no further communication arrived from the clan house, assumed she had been quietly returned to a different family by mutual arrangement. They did not seek further confirmation. They closed her line in their own household record 3 weeks later as married away, contact not maintained. The clan house, in its own surviving records, made no entry for the marriage at all. The bride's wedding garments were not burned. The eldest grandmother folded them carefully and placed them in the locked wooden chest at the back of the bridal chamber wardrobe. She locked the chest. She placed the key in the small lacquered box on her own personal shelf. She did not speak of the chest to any other household member during the remaining 7 years of her life. The bride's name, from her father's house, was not entered anywhere in the clan house record. It was never spoken in the household after the 3rd night. The name the household had selected to give her on the morning of her wedding rite was not entered either. She had no name in either record. They did not hide one thing. They divided her into objects no one had to connect. Her body went under the pines. Her garments went into the chest. Her name went nowhere. The pines had no marker. The chest had no name. The key had no label. The word that was used for her, in the years that followed, was Son-gaksi. The word appears in early 20th century Korean ethnographic registers as a folkloric category for the spirit of an unmarried bride who died before completing her rite of passage. The file treats this register as historically plausible practice, not as proof of one specific household. The category carries with it a set of customary protections. The household is permitted to mourn the category without naming the person. The village is permitted to acknowledge the loss without inquiring after the cause. The neighboring households are permitted to leave small offerings of dried fruit and folded paper at the unmarked clearing under the pines without asking who has been buried there. The category does not require a name. The category, in fact, requires the absence of a name. That is the function of the category. Mun-ha's field notes, recovered in 2024, describe this function with cold precision. The word Son-gaksi was not, Mun-ha observed, a Korean folkloric superstition projected onto a death by an uneducated village. The word Son-gaksi was a Korean folkloric administration. It permitted a clan house to dispose of an unfinished rite without entering the unfinished rite in any record. The household was not required to explain why the bride had not crossed. The category supplied the explanation in advance. The bride was Son-gaksi. She had been unable to cross because she had been the kind of bride who could not cross. The category absorbed the failure of the rite and returned to the household a clean record. Mun-ha's field notes record this without judgment. She does not condemn the household. She does not condemn the village. She does not condemn the early 20th century Korean folkloric registers that documented the category. What she condemns, in a single line at the bottom of her recovered field notes for this case, is the operation by which the category was applied to a specific person. A safer word buried the real name. A category can preserve a story. It can also make a person disappear inside it. The Son-gaksi category is real. The Korean folkloric tradition that named it is real. The hauntings reported across the century by the household's surviving descendants and by the neighboring villages were real, in the register that Origin Protocol and the UNCROSSED preserve as the cultural matrix of Korean threshold folklore. What was buried under the pines, Mun-ha's field notes conclude, was not Son-gaksi. Son-gaksi is a category. What was buried under the pines was a 16-year-old whose name had been suspended for 3 days, who had stopped at a threshold she had not been told she would have to cross alone, and whose family was not informed for 3 weeks that she had not returned. The category did not bury her. The household did. The category provided the cover. Mun-ha did not look for the ghost. She looked for the closure that had learned to look like a room. Mun-ha returned to the bridal chamber on the 5th day of her investigation. She had recovered the artifacts beneath the threshold. She had located the unmarked grave under the pines. She had read the surviving private records of the household, recovered from a sealed metal box found beneath the floorboards of the eldest grandmother's former room, and confirmed that no marriage entry had been made for the spring of 1911. She had identified, through the records of the bride's father's village 4 ridges to the west, the bride's name as it had been entered in her father's household before being suspended for the 3-day pre-rite period. She did not yet know what the household had selected as her new married name. That information, she would write in her field notes, was held in only one place in the world. The bride's wedding garments had not been burned. The eldest grandmother had folded them and placed them in the locked wooden chest at the back of the bridal chamber wardrobe in the spring of 1911. The chest had not been opened since. The key, in its small lacquered box on the eldest grandmother's personal shelf, had not been touched in the 7 years between the bride's death and the eldest grandmother's own death in 1918. After the eldest grandmother's death, the lacquered box had remained on the shelf. The key had remained inside the box. The chest had remained locked. Mun-ha located the lacquered box on the 3rd day of her investigation. The key was inside. Mun-ha did not, she wrote in her field notes, immediately use the key. She returned to the chamber on the 5th day. She placed the key on the floor beside the chest. She removed the wallpaper covering the back panel of the wardrobe. She found, behind the wallpaper, a second door. What Mun-ha found in the recessed cavity behind the second door was a folded packet of aged hanji paper, 12 pages thick, written in iron gall ink in a careful hand that Mun-ha would later determine, through comparison with the bride's father's village records, had been the bride's own. The packet had been written across the 3 days of the pre-rite period, between the bride's arrival at the clan house and the night she did not cross. She had written the packet in the brief intervals when the household women had left her alone in the bridal chamber to attend to the pre-rite preparations. She had hidden each completed page behind the wardrobe back panel through the second door her father, who was a carpenter by training, had built into the wardrobe at her own request when the wardrobe had been prepared as part of her trousseau. Her father had built the second door without telling the household it was there. He had built it because his daughter had asked him to. She had asked him to in the autumn before she was sent to the clan house. She had not, Mun-ha noted, told her father why she wanted a hidden cavity behind the wardrobe. Her father had not asked. The packet was 12 pages. Mun-ha read the packet on the night of her 5th day at the clan house, by the warm low light of a single battery lantern, seated on the bare wooden floor of the bridal chamber where the bride had written the packet 113 years earlier. The packet did not contain a denunciation. It did not contain a curse. It did not contain a request for revenge. The packet contained, on the first 11 pages, a careful and precise account of the 3 days of the pre-rite period as the bride had experienced them. The account was not bitter. The account was not frightened. The account was attentive. She had observed the household. She had observed the senior cousins. She had observed the eldest grandmother. She had recorded what she had been told and what she had not been told. The 12th page, the last page, contained one sentence. The sentence was not addressed to any specific reader. The sentence asked only that her name from her father's house be spoken once, by someone, after she was gone. Without shame. She had not written to accuse them. She had written to remain someone. Not a bride spirit. Not a category. Someone. Mun-ha read the 12th page twice. She refolded the packet. She placed it in an archival sleeve. She did not, in her field notes, transcribe the bride's name from her father's house. The name was not, she observed, hers to publish. On the night of her 6th day at the clan house, Seo Mun-ha conducted the closing of the case. She did not call a shaman. She did not call a priest. She did not assemble a household. She did not perform a public rite. She brought to the bridal chamber threshold 3 things. A small water bowl filled with clear water. A single coiled length of red thread. A folded strip of fresh hanji paper, on which she had written nothing. She placed the 3 items on the threshold beam in the position the bride had occupied on the night she did not cross. She knelt at the courtyard side of the threshold. She did not speak for a long time. Then she spoke the bride's name from her father's house. She spoke it once. She spoke it without shame. She did not ask the door to open. She did not ask the spirit to leave. She did not perform any further word or gesture. She knelt at the threshold and waited. The door, in her field record, opened from the chamber side. Mun-ha did not push it. She did not pull it. She did not touch it. The door, she wrote in her closing field note line, had been waiting 113 years to be opened from the side it had been closed from. The closing happened at a time and in a manner that her instruments could not document. She did not attempt to record it on video. She did not attempt to record it on audio. She had brought no instrumentation to the threshold beyond the 3 items. She had decided, on the 5th day, that this case would be closed without instrumentation. The closing happened. She wrote in her final field note line that she had spoken the name and the door had opened and that what had crossed without observation and that the chamber, when she stood up an unspecified time later, had been empty in a register she had not before that night encountered. The room did not become safe. It became empty in the right way. The uncrossed. Case file TX-001. Subject, Son-gaksi. Status, closed by name. Containment method, the door opened from her side. Field investigators' closing line: not every ghost wants revenge. Some are still waiting for the door to open. Cross-reference. The uncrossed files document occult cases of spirits, grief, and the doors the dead could not cross. The archive draws from threshold folklore motifs across cultures and reconstructs them through the lens of fictional field investigators whose work centers on the question that Origin Protocol Companion Archive does not ask, not what the entity was, but what kept it from passing on. Each case is a reconstructed field investigation, presented in cold documentary format with field note insertions. TX-001 introduces the channel through Son-gaksi, a Korean folkloric category for the spirit of an unmarried bride who died before completing her rite of passage, investigated by Seo Mun-ha, a fictional field investigator whose method centers on reading the door behind the door, the closure that was performed by the living rather than the dead. The case as reconstructed centers on a Southern Mountain clan house in the early 1910s where a young bride died on the threshold of her bridal chamber the night before her wedding rite was to be completed. The family, according to Mun-ha's field notes recovered in 2024, did not bury her grief, they buried her name, removing it from the household record, the marriage ledger, and the village memory, replacing it with the safe folkloric category, Son-gaksi, which permitted the family to mourn a category rather than a person. The hauntings that followed across the century, Mun-ha's field notes observe, were not the spirit's refusal to leave the world. They were the spirit waiting for one of the living to open the door from the inside, by speaking the name that the family had taken back. The folded hanji testimony Mun-ha recovered in 2024 from behind the bridal chamber wall did not ask for revenge. It asked for a name to be spoken without shame. Future case files in the Uncrossed archive will introduce additional field investigators as the cases require them, building the archive's working method through the cases themselves rather than through any prior orientation. End of file.